So first up, we are going to be speaking about Chelsea, and the first question goes to you, Emma, because an away win, 1-0 in the end, Slavia Prague. How happy will Maurizio Sarri be with that win?
Well, I think for any manager going away in Europe with a clean sheet at this stage of the competition is where he wants. And knowing that he's made the changes that he's made tonight with such a big game coming up at the weekend, I think it's a perfect result for Chelsea. When
you look at the team that he left on the bench, the players that he left on the bench, he has rotated quite a lot in this competition anyway. Kante, Higuain, Hazard, Loftus-Cheek, Luiz all on the bench. How seriously is he taking this competition now?
Very seriously, because, you know, he's entered into the quarter-finals in the same phase of how he's approached it from the start. And, you know, to be in this position and to go away from home and win, like Emma said, just shows you that he's approaching it in the right manner that's right for Chelsea Football Club at the moment. And, you know, I think a draw away from home tonight would have been a good result, but that's an excellent result for Chelsea.
We've seen a lot of pressure on Maurizio Sarri lately from the fan base. Do you feel that at the moment, with results in the Premier League and also this result tonight, that public opinion is slightly changing?
Well, I think results help in our business, and the reality is that Chelsea have found consistent performance. I think the blooding and the integration of younger players, in particular Callum and Ruben Loftus-Cheek to the team, I think has really helped and given the squad even more depth. I think it's fair to say throughout the season he has utilised the squad in both campaigns, in the European competition and the domestic competition. But Chelsea, let's not forget, you know, in the business of competing for trophies at the season end, at the end of the season, every year. So, you know, we are a club that know how to do this, and we're in a strong position at the moment.
We just mentioned about blooding new talent and rotating players and perhaps public perception of Maurizio Sarri, but we see lately Ruben Loftus-Cheek getting starts and also Callum Hudson-Odoi's first start in the Premier League. We have had a tweet in, actually, that somebody's asking whether they think that, actually, if you'd have done this sooner, it might have been a little bit better. You can see it now on your screen. What do you think?
For me personally, yes. I think it's a key feature for Chelsea as a football club moving forwards, to give their young players a pathway to play and to make themselves icons at the club. And I think, you know, you look at past successful periods at Chelsea as a team, I think they've had that. I think the fans have had that to look at and to celebrate. And yes, I believe the more and maybe the sooner that could have been done, the better. And you know, it's a club with a lot of good young talent, and, you know, it'd be good to see them play more in the first team.
Well, I think it's important to get that balance, though, because at 18 years of age, his body's maturing, and going from youth football into senior football, week in, week out, as we've seen with the way I think Mourinho managed Rashford. It's being able... I mean, Hudson-Odoi has played more games than any other 18-year-old in the Premier League this season, in terms of, you know, coming through... I think it is time, and the quality and talent is there at Chelsea, and now it's proving that, you know, the opportunities are coming their way.
I think I agree with you on the physical side of it, but there's also giving him that responsibility and growing. And I think starting a Premier League game like he did midweek, just doing that alone is a big step for a young player. And I think, excuse me, it's more about the actual confidence and the development of their belief that they're going to play at that level than maybe it is a physical thing. And I think the more opportunities they can get to start him in big games and to give him that feeling, I think is going to help him develop even more.
And there's another player at Chelsea who has been left out this season. We haven't seen much of him lately at all, and it's Danny Drinkwater. We know, obviously, he's been in the press this week, been charged with drink driving. But the discussion has moved on slightly as well, because Maurizio Sarri came out with these quotes. I'm going to read you them. He's not suited to my system and my way of playing. I told him everything in August. He appreciated but decided to remain, and so he knew very well the situation. So he's told him to go out and look for something else, but the player wanted to stay. What was your initial reaction when you heard those quotes?
Well, I think, you know, the manager's clear about what he's looking for in the style of play, and it's not always what a player wants to hear in that situation. And I don't think Drinkwater's career at Chelsea has gone the way perhaps he would have wanted. But the realities are the manager has been put in that position to select players that he feels is best suited to bring success to the club. And, you know, I think for both the player and the club, they have to consider what that will look like at the end of the season, because, you know, otherwise Danny Drinkwater's going to go through 2 years of his career of not playing a lot of football, and I think perhaps that's what's got to be his priority from here on in.
How unhealthy is this situation? I mean, you've got a player that can play but isn't suited and isn't favoured by the manager. He's on a lot of money and he's not playing. Can it cause unhealthiness behind the ranks, like behind the scenes?
I think it is. You know, it's an unhealthy thing. Full stop. There's not a lot of winners in that situation. I can understand how the move came about. You know, Danny Drinkwater had an excellent season with Leicester and won the title. I can understand why he would have an appetite to go to a club like Chelsea. So, you know, as a player, you have these opportunities maybe only once in your career. So, you know, to grab it with both hands is probably the right move for him. But, you know, so it hasn't worked out. It didn't work out under Conte either, really, did it? I know he's had a worse season this season in terms of appearances. But it is then difficult to sometimes manufacture that move away, given the circumstance of his position. And, you know, we were saying a little bit earlier about how difficult it can be for players when they're out of favour, they're on good contracts, but that next move or that exit out of the club has to be right. You know, you have to go into the right environment without playing solidly for 2 years that can support you to get back to playing well, because it's not a tap. You don't just kind of turn it on and off from being out of the team for 2 years and all of a sudden you rediscover that form in 3 matches. You know, it takes a bit of time sometimes.
Yeah, especially you've got to find, as I say, a system. You think about it, you know, under Conte, you had Kante being a pivotal player, and under this manager, it's Jorginho. It's been difficult because of the quality of the players that are at Chelsea. So I think consideration for that next move will preoccupy most of his time.
I think there's a question mark over the fit for him at Chelsea, given, you know, he had an excellent season, but it was a very unique style of football that Leicester won the Premier League. It was very direct, it was high tempo. You know, he was playing great passes in behind, very early balls round the corner for Vardy over the top. And, you know, you don't really see Chelsea playing in that style. So I think, you know, that was maybe a detriment to him coming into the club.
Especially while Fabregas was there.
For sure.
I think when you got a player like Fabregas, Da Costa, you know, I think that partnership was significant. And I think if you don't hit the ground running, or you don't get yourself into a positive position, like you said, you go 2 years without a game, it then gets even harder to get into the team. And, you know, that's unfortunate. But that is football. It happens. And I think for him, it's trying to find the right solution, and that may take time for it to get to that.
How might he be feeling? Because it's obviously clear to everybody else that he's not favoured by Sarri because he hasn't featured. But Sarri coming out and being quite vocal with what he's saying, how might that make Danny Drinkwater feel?
Well, I think that because he's had this conversation with him personally, then you already know your stance. I mean, whether or not it needs to be said publicly, that's the manager's choice. I don't think anyone didn't know that beforehand because he hasn't featured. So, you know, it's not a nice feeling, but the reality is everyone can see he's not playing. The manager's had the conversation and been upfront with him, which is the most you can ask for, I might add. I think that's a good thing that the manager can come to you and say that. It can only put you in a positive position, and, you know, doubt is the worst thing, or frustration in that situation. If you're clear about why you're not playing and you know, then it's up to you to try and forge a path out, then it kind of puts the ball in your court a little bit, which I think, you know, what Maurizio Sarri's trying to do.
This all happens in the backdrop, of course, with this transfer ban that may or may not happen. At the moment, they've lodged an appeal. That was today. If it's not lifted, it'll be a 2-window transfer ban. Can they afford to have unused talent like that?
What is this Chelsea night, is it?
It is, isn't it? Is this Chelsea section?
Yeah, well, I think whatever happens regarding a transfer ban, I think it's fair to say that if the appeal is successful or not, the club are best placed to manage that arrangement, because we have several young players and loan players across the globe that will be given opportunity as a result of that. But I think that process has to happen first before it's not a foregone conclusion that it is. And I think until that's resolved, then, you know, Chelsea, you know, have to just compete for the trophies they're in right now and recognise that there are a group of players beyond the current squad that are capable to come in, and perhaps this will be an opportunity for the club so that other players will be able to progress through coming back from loans or through our youth system that perhaps might not otherwise get the opportunity to play.
And that is it. If you're going to look for a positive in a situation like this, should it happen, it is that there are such a big squad and all these young players out on loan that could be recalled and be given the chance, man.
I absolutely think it's possibly one of the best things that could happen for Chelsea at the moment. You know, I think it could be a really positive thing for exactly those reasons you've just mentioned. And, you know, creating a pathway at a football club for a young player, and I know that there are players in and around the squad and getting some game time, but, you know, to get really established into a team and become a dependable, focused, you know, member of that team, that starting 11 week in, week out, I think is so important for young players.
Well, look at Tottenham. I mean, arguably, I'm sure Tottenham fans won't appreciate me saying this, but Tottenham have been in their own transfer ban for 2 transfer windows. Technically, well, they haven't, but they haven't purchased players. And then you see the young players progressing through there. They're still in the quarterfinals of the Champions League, top 4 at this current time, and done that without buying a single player. Now, you know, it can be done at Chelsea.
Yeah, but the biggest thing is the manager, isn't it? You know, when you look at that, one of the biggest things for that to happen is the manager. And Pochettino is more than happy to work and develop young players while trying to win something. And I know people will say, well, he hasn't won anything. And fair enough, you know, at this moment in time you can say that. But I think it's so important to get that balance right. And maybe Spurs haven't quite been able to have that balance right. The stadium and other things have had a different financial focus for them. But Chelsea have had the opportunity to do that right. And I don't think they quite have done it. So maybe this ban could maybe force them to have a bit more balance and to look into the academy and the young players that they have.
All right, elsewhere in Europe this evening, Arsenal. Well, we're going to move on from Chelsea now so you can have a little bit of a breath and we can talk about somebody else in London as well. A good win for Arsenal, but is it enough?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, Matt and I were talking about my own team playing in the Champions League, 2-0 up from the home leg against Paris, went away and were hanging on for dear life until the last 5 minutes of the game. 2-0, as we know, most dangerous scoreline in football. And I think considering the chances they've missed tonight, it's going to be a tricky tie going away. So I'm not sure if it is, to be honest.
He set up with a very strong team. When we saw the team sheets and big players in there, he obviously wants to go and go far in this competition, potentially win it. He's got a lot of experience as well in this competition. Do you think he feels more comfortable in this ground than in the Premier League?
Maybe. Maybe he does. Maybe he does feel that. I kind of feel that there were some changes that, you know, the game at Everton at the weekend, there were some changes that were imposed on them due to illness, players not being quite fit. Koscielny maybe can't play the Sunday, then the Thursday. You know, various different things rumbling away. But when you look at that team in the Premier League that started and then you look at the team that started tonight, for me there's a significant difference in terms of the quality and how good that starting 11 is.
But then you've got to add the home and the away factor, because that is the biggest problem for Arsenal. It's not Emirates, it's away from home.
Totally, and it's getting the players on board to be able to play away from home. Kolasinac, Ozil, you know, these type of players who at home, for me, do absolutely, you know, can do brilliant things at times. So, you know, 2-0 with Arsenal's away form and how they are, and just the opportunities they had tonight. You know, that, it could have been 4-0.
I think the thing is, what you know, you don't realise it's the crowd and the influence the crowd has and the type of game, and if it's a hostile environment and they concede early, it will be a tricky evening, and that'll be on the back of playing a tough Premier League game. At the weekend.
How do you, in your experience, if you've got teams that are struggling on the road, how do you fix that? How do you change? Is it a mentality thing that they're struggling with?
Yeah, I think so. I think you have to set the team up to be in a position to not only perform but produce the type of performance that's required away from home.
He's tried to do that, in fairness to him, hasn't he? I mean, he really has tinkered with formation, especially away from home.
There's no doubt, but I think if you're playing Ozil, Mkhitaryan away from home in the same side where you know that it's a difficult place to go, Everton, I think your chances of being successful are lower. You then leave your best player out in Ramsey, and I think that their struggle, I think being able to put on enough creative influence but be steely enough in the right situations, I think getting the balance right is something that I think he's struggled with away from home, not at home.
Yeah, I mean, I think from this game, there are other changes that maybe force that hand, but I agree. I think that he hasn't found, or perhaps he has found, and he is learning from which players can do the role that he wants them to do away from home.
But I also think it's his first time going away to Premier League grounds, and you learn a lot. Learn which ones, you know, some players really struggle at versus others, and there is a learning curve that goes with that. And Will they do enough to get enough away wins, both in Europa League and the Premier League? That's the question.